Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Scouted Football Podcast. I'd just like to begin today's episode by apologising for last week's heinous crime of forgetting to ensure that my microphone was turned on. Myself and Matt Woosnam of The Athletic had an excellent discussion about Crystal Palace's regeneration, and I ruined it by sounding like I was talking to him via a paper cup and string. Today, though, we have another week, another episode, another guest. I'm delighted to welcome Marc Lamberts, a recruitment, video, set piece and opposition analyst who has worked for various clubs in various capacities. And it isn't really hard to see why, given the areas of expertise which he has. Marc is currently writing a book about the history of AS Roma and Roman legend, Unico Grande Amore, it's called, and that'll be available next year. But he hails from the Netherlands, and that is today's topic of conversation. Always a great league to scout, especially if you're looking for standout young players. And this year's no different. Marc, welcome to the Scouted Pod. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Yeah, not bad at all. Looking forward to discussing some players in the Eredivisie and the Eerste Divisie as well, which is, I think, people kind of overlook it a little bit, but it's quite a good standard of second division, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the level of play doesn't necessarily mean that it's like a very top league in second tier, but I think that the way of playing, the philosophy in that second division or the second tier, is instrumental for the belief to grow on to the Eredivisie, but also a lot of English clubs, UK clubs have scouted in the first division, Eerste Divisie, and yeah, there are some players who made the step from there to League One, League Two, and I think it's kind of overlooked.
Yeah, definitely. I think I agree with that there. And we'll get into that in a little while. But just as sort of an introduction for yourself, Marc, you've worked as a professional scout and analyst. You've got a connection with VVV-Venlo, but you've also got your UEFA B license. And I'm just curious to know about the different types of scouting and analysis work that you've done, with, being an opposition analyst, recruitment analyst, set piece analysis as well. I think anyone who's followed you on Twitter will have seen the threads that you've done about different teams as set pieces, and they're really fascinating to see. What's it like working in your capacity?
It's interesting. First of all, yeah, I've done different kinds, different types of scouting and analysis. I think the main thing is that I started as an academy scout, and I can really recommend that if you want to learn actual scouting. So focus on the attributes of the player, how player behave in different scenarios and games, and recognize talent. So recognize talent. Talent doesn't mean that a player is there already, but it has the potential to grow into something like a first team player. Doesn't matter the level, if it's fourth division or first division or UEFA Champions League or whatever. The idea and the capacity to recognize talent for academies is something that's very valuable. Later on, when you are judging young players to come into a first team, and yeah, that's how you, well, some people say proper scouting. That's how you go to matches and scout players and assess their abilities and write reports and deliver them to your coordinator or your whoever is in charge of recruitment. And from there on, I made the little steps to the first team. I did some recruitment analysis, and actually, you can scout out in the open, go to games. You create profiles of what do we need as a squad, and which players do you need to scout for that. And you also learn how to scout, to learn to look how the mentality of a player is. So it's a lot of kids have talent, boys and girls have talent, but how do they react to a negative situation? And that's how they respond to something on the pitch or off the pitch. That's something that's overlooked a little bit, but it's a vital importance of what makes a player suitable for an academy or first team. And yeah, that's something I've done in the past few years, and I really enjoy that.
Yeah, I mean, just from that sort of brief introduction there, I mean, it sounds very interesting. You're kind of watching. I mean, we all watch football in a certain way. You know, the vast majority of people watch it for entertainment purposes. But what you're doing, or what at least what it sounds like, what you're doing is, you know, you're looking at things through a different lens, effectively. You know, you're the reacting. It's quite fascinating to me, the way that you'll be looking at how players react to negative situations, whereas, you know, the average fan might not be sort of thinking about that in a situation. So it does make it quite an interesting profession, I can imagine. But you've also got three flags in your Twitter bio, and that's the
Yeah,
Netherlands, of course, the Welsh flag, and is it Tanzania as well?
yeah, exactly. My father is Dutch and my mom is Tanzanian. And yeah, so that's the main reason why those flags are there. A really strong feel both cultures, both identities as well. So I'm very proud of my Dutch and Tanzanian heritage. But I'm actually Welsh is a big part of my identity as well. My grandfather is Welsh and has family in Wales. And yeah, I've been there a lot of times. I'm fascinated by the culture and the languages as well. And
Mm.
you know, when people think of Welsh football in a general sense, they almost, well, 80% of the time refer to the teams that play in the English football pyramid, league and non-league. But there's much more about Welsh football that is underlooked, and well, this is something I wanted to address and write about, and I might have a kind of exciting project on the way, looking at statistics from the Welsh Premier League and the league behind that. So yeah, I'm very proud of that Welsh heritage too. So that's why those three flags are up there.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, I was curious myself. Anybody who follows you on Twitter, or anybody who doesn't already, I'm sure they'll have been curious as well. So hopefully, that will have shed some light on it. And if you do want to follow Mark, he is at Lamberts Mark with a C, on Twitter. But I suppose we'd better get into sort of the meat of this podcast, and that's the Dutch scouting, and, you know, obviously the top two tiers in the Netherlands being the Eredivisie and the Eerste Divisie. I mean, we'll start with the Eredivisie, which most people will be familiar with, or at least know. You know, summing up that division, it's got a reputation for being one of the best, you know, top flights in Europe for player development. I mean, I've got my opinions on why that is the case, but I was quite curious to find out what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah. So basically, what I think that is that two things has happened since the 1970s is that um, football has had a big part in Dutch in Dutch life, and the way it's played. Total football is very important for a lot of people, so that was implemented in all the academies. And in the 1970s, you have Ajax and Feyenoord winning Europa Cups as well. PSV in the 1980s. So those those clubs were instrumental to the success of Dutch football, and that is implemented in academies. The way it's played is important as well as the result. So not everything about the result is a holy thing. And on the other hand, it's very important to see that Dutch football is not as wealthy compared to the big leagues, the big top five leagues, maybe other leagues as well. So um, there's a need to develop players. There's a need to develop players and sell them, and that is how you make money. So because of the sponsors and the budgets are different, there's a need to develop, and that means playing youngsters and giving them time and making them suitable to get to other leagues. For example, if you have a young player and he doesn't have minutes, he can't develop, and as he doesn't develop or play minutes, he's not suitable for other clubs. Other clubs want players, young players that have made minutes. So I think that's one of the two things.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. I think the point that I was going to make was the fact that the Eredivisie isn't flushed with cash in the same way that the other top European leagues are. I mean, we look at the Premier League. I mean, there's been in a COVID affected marketplace, there's still been over £1 billion or €1 billion worth of transfer fees exchanged this summer. Obviously a little bit less in other major leagues across Europe, but I think that kind of shows that. I mean, that would be absolutely unprecedented in the Netherlands. You look at
Mm.
some of the record transfer fees for some of the clubs that regularly play in the top flight, and they're only a couple million, if that. And it is sort of operating on a completely different financial plane. But yeah, that was the point I was going to make, is that naturally you can't spend 10 and 15 million on players that are going to then just go and sit on the bench. So what you have to do is essentially promote from within. And I think that sets us up nicely for sort of a little bit of discussion later on in this podcast episode about the Eerste Divisie and why perhaps B teams are quite necessary in the Netherlands. But in terms of players that catch your eye, that's always a feature of this podcast. Is we always like to discuss individual players and what they offer and why they are a name that people should maybe take note of. But
Yeah.
I mean, for you, who in the Eredivisie this season or last season, who are the players that have perhaps that to the mainstream might not be as well known, but should be.
Well, I have three players, and they're relatively new actually in the Eredivisie, or at the level they're playing. So we have Quentin Timber, so his family from Urin Timber. He moved from Ajax to Utrecht this season, and I think he will be an outstanding player. Can play in midfield and defense, and his position and vision is really good. You can see that he knows where to position himself, or even though he might physically not been able to cover it all, he knows where to position himself to make it tough for the opponent. And I think passing is good, and as a lot of Ajax players have and how they have been educated. But I think the anticipation of what is happening, so thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead of what is happening, attacking wise, was defensive wise, I think that's a really, really strong point of him. And I think that Utrecht is a very good club for him to go to. It's not like a top club. It's not a very established like top 5 club, but they're aiming to get the top 4 every year, top 4, top 5, and I think that's a very good step to take for a lot of youngsters that can't break into the actual top teams. So that's my number 1 pick. Mind you, I'm a very I love defenders and defensive-minded players, so I might be talking a lot about defenders today. Second one is Ven Mullatieri from AZ. He had an excellent season with Go Ahead Eagles last season. Got promoted with them, and for the scouts out there and analysts, he might not be a difficult name or a name that you have been hearing before. He has been scouted by a lot of clubs. AZ took him this season. I think he can do a really good job with them. He's excellent in the air. Causes a threat also with attacking set pieces. He's very focused and very determined. So decision making is absolutely good. There's no doubt in what he wants to do on the ball and off the ball. Excellent leadership qualities, and I think his passing and the defensive positioning is really good and already one of the best in the league. If he also will develop in the next season, he might be very interesting for a lot of bigger clubs in the future.
Yeah, and I know what you mean. And going to AZ is obviously a well trodden pathway. I mean, in the past few years, we've seen the likes of Owen Wijndal, Calvin Stengs, Myron Boadu. They've kind of put themselves onto another level in terms of how they're regarded in European football, and that's through their performances with AZ. And Sam Berkmaar, as you say there, or having signed from Go Ahead Eagles this summer. This year rather. He's one that I think 22 years old, 6'2" tall, central defender. He certainly has the profile to perhaps make it as a more household name among sort of the scouting community. And sort of my two picks are a bit less left field than those two from you, Mark, because they're probably a bit more well known in the UK, and that's Ryan Gravenberch and Noni Madueke, who are absolutely fantastic players. They're excellent. They had brilliant seasons last year. They've started this year just as well, and they're two players that I'm very, very excited about because I believe they're still both teenagers, which, to be talking about them in such, high regard already, before they've even turned 20, to the fact that they've played, in their cases, just over probably about 1.5 seasons worth. In fact, probably less in Madueke's case, considering he was kind of a super sub last season and is now a much more pivotal member of the PSV squad. But as a bit of an overview, Ryan Gravenberch is a number 8 predominantly, but he can play sort of a little bit deeper. He can also play a little bit forward. He's very, very rangy. I think he's got a fantastic stride. He can cover so much space just by moving his body to the left or right or forward or backwards, because he's around 6'3" tall, and just patrols that midfield. I think the one thing that probably stands out to most people about Gravenberch is his progressive carrying. He can just take the ball up the pitch at will, and there's very little that other teams can do to stop him, and that kind of lends itself well to his natural attacking instinct, which is on display quite often for Ajax. Obviously one of the strongest teams in the Netherlands, and they tend to dominate games. So naturally, he's going to be involved in the attacking phases quite often. And what he does do really well is that he supports the attacks quite well. You'll see a lot of number 8s who will perhaps play that ball to the forward line and then maybe sit back a little bit and be a bit more reserved. But with Gravenberch, he kind of keeps going and he joins the forward line, or he just hangs back a tiny bit on the edge of the penalty area. And from there, I'm sure you'll have seen plenty of his goals, Mark, but from there, his range is spectacular. He's got great technique from that position on the pitch. And there was a goal that he scored against Leeds in pre-season in a 4-0 win, which was just was excellent. The technique, he managed to just hit it low, hit it flat, but hit it really, really powerful. And that's something which, if you already have that at sort of 18, 19 as a midfielder, then it's certainly something to get excited about. But Madueke as well, I think, we talk about players who are going to have breakout seasons all the time. I think this is, the clearest indicator. The way that he has started this campaign for PSV Eindhoven is it's the clearest indication of this is the potential for a breakout year. We discussed him briefly on this podcast a little while ago, probably around summer 2020, as he was just kind of breaking into the first team at PSV. And he was, you could see there was definitely something there. But over the past 6 to 8 months, as he's started to become a bit more of a regular starter for PSV, he's become really, really important. And, anytime you tune in to watch a PSV game now, there's a very, very good chance that he's either going to get on the score sheet or he's going to assist somebody because he's so direct. He's got, I think in my profile in one of the Scouted Football handbooks on Madueke, I profiled him and I said that he's kind of a bit like a dodgem car, where he kind of just bounces off opposition challenges. He kind of uses them as a buffer to kind of just move through challenges. And I think, again, in the same way that with Gravenberch having the ability to support attacks, to be already a really first-class progressive carrier, Madueke is the same in terms of his ability to evade pressure, to evade danger in the final third, especially. And I think if anybody hasn't heard of him before, he's English first and foremost. He came through the Tottenham Hotspur academy, had some previous at Crystal Palace as well, but decided to go over to the Netherlands, and it's a move which has paid dividends massively for him, because he's now a starter at one of the biggest Dutch clubs there is. So I think we'll definitely be seeing more of him. We'll definitely be hearing more about him, and just as a final point on him, whenever I see him do interviews, he just seems as though he's this really jovial, really, down to earth kind of guy. He seems as though he's like, quite easy to get along with, and kind of rides the the difficult questioning that he sometimes gets from interviewers. But yeah, he's definitely one which, I mean, for me, he's absolutely set for a breakout season. I don't know if you agree, Mark.
Yeah, and I think he made the right choice to go to PSV as well. And in the terms of talent development, I think it's going to be a really good season for him. And I think he has a good attitude, and with this coach, with this manager, mentality is a big thing, and you can be as talented as you want, but the mentality aspect, that is what he wants. And if you combine it with the massive amount of talent he has, well, it's difficult to say where he will end, but I will definitely go to a top five league club and a top half club as well. So it's very exciting to see him. He's so direct. He has confidence. He doesn't he has no doubts in what he wants to do with his actions. So that's very exciting. A good shot on both feet. Yeah, I'm really excited to see him this season, and I really believe that this will also be like his breakout season, also his last season in the Eredivisie if he continues like this.
Yeah, I think that's a reality, isn't it, for a lot of standout players in the Eredivisie, is that, you do get to a point where you think, the top five leagues are going to be calling, and no doubt already, a flurry of top clubs will have been tracking him and tracking his progress. So it seems a matter of when, not if, for him. But moving on to sort of the Eerste Divisie, and we touched on it a little bit earlier, and this is perhaps one of the areas which the majority of people listening to this pod won't have, too much for knowledge about. The extent of my knowledge of the Eerste Divisie is that it's a really high scoring division. Last season, we saw Cambuur Leeuwarden, the pronunciation I've probably butchered there, but they scored 109 goals in 38 games and went up as champions. So they're playing in the Eredivisie this season. But also there's the B team model, which kind of works in the Eerste Divisie as well, where you've got the young PSV, young Ajax, young AZ, and young Utrecht sides, which are essentially development teams. They're feeder teams to the senior squads who play in the top flight. The experience that those players get of playing professional football at 17, 18, which prepares them for going up against European level opposition when they come to play for the senior squads in the Eredivisie. I mean, Ryan Gravenberch is a prime example of that. I think he made his young Ajax debut when he was around 16. But has he's come through the ranks and earned his place in the Ajax team. Just going back to the point about it being a high-scoring league, I mean, Mark, I'm sure I know you have a much better grasp of the Eerste Divisie than I do. But why is it that it's consistently a really high-scoring division?
So when you look at top flights, the main what you can say is that the top team with the best defense becomes champion, because their attack is so high quality that the best defense naturally is up there. So I'm talking about if you look at the Premier League or Serie A or Primera La Liga, that's the case. But in the Eerste Divisie, it's so unpredictable. Everyone can win from each other. So there are a lot of the emphasis is on technique, the technique. So attacking football, everyone plays attacking football. There's no one that sits back and throw in the bus. Why? No, well, there's a reason relegation is not fully incorporated. So there's a lot of development going on, even if you are 19th or 18th. Another thing is that people always want the ball as a technical, and scoring is a natural thing. But so there are not a lot of matches where the other team doesn't score. So if you are technical, you will win the league. So you can see that the high scoring teams will obviously be in contention for promotion. Cambuur Leeuwarden is a different case because they were really good. Year before they were champions as well, but they were the season was null and void because of the COVID pandemic. But they kept their squad together, they kept the faith, and they played massively. Had a really good striker. And the thing is that you can see that as well in England with players that are Premier League quality, but go to the championship and have enormous seasons. That's the thing with Cambuur also. There were a few players who could have played Eredivisie level, but they prefer to play in an attacking squad and a possession dominating squad than playing against relegation. And the relegation fight in the Netherlands in the Eredivisie is very much a defensive minded player style. So if you got the ball as an attacker, you need to be good with room and space before you. You have to be agile, quick, good in the counter attack, and not every player is built like that. So I think it's a combination of good players coming into the top clubs in First Division, Eerste Divisie, and the way it is played. Everyone wants to score. Everyone. I don't like the phrase "everyone wants to play" because if you are a defensive-minded team with a low block, you also want to play. I don't like when people say anti-football, but the reality is that every team wants to play offensive football, and that's why you have sometimes you have a 6-1, sometimes you have a 5-3, sometimes you have a 4-2. Sometimes it's just a very high-scoring league.
Yeah, I know where you're coming from. And as I was doing sort of the research for this pod, I was browsing over sort of the goals and assist tallies of certain players. And I spotted that was it Robert Muren, who was involved in something like 50 goals last season with like 38 goals of his own and then like 12 assists for Volendam, which was just, I mean, they're incredible numbers. But I do echo what you're trying to say about, you know, I don't like it when people say, "Oh, this is anti-football," or it's a different way of playing. That's essentially what it is. You know, it's a different style, and it's, you know, a lot of the time it's to do with a specific team's strengths. But if there's if there's, I mean, league wide, if, you know, the finances are quite level compared to other divisions, then naturally that is going to breed a competition where anybody can beat anybody, and as a result, you will get more entertaining competitive matches at that level. But you've also got a relationship with VVV-Venlo, and
Mm-hmm.
I was quite curious about them because they're not a club that I have a lot of experience with. I don't think I've ever watched a game that they've played apart from maybe last season when they played Ajax with that famous game, which you probably won't like me bringing up, of course. But I mean, this season, what is it about them that is there anything to be excited about? Are there any players, any under 23 players in particular that you think maybe are in that bracket where they're playing Eerste Divisie football when they could actually play Eredivisie football?
The thing is that a lot of players have left naturally because of relegation. We had the top scorer of the Eredivisie who hasn't been sold yet. But you never know when this pod comes out what has happened. But he needs to be sold in order to get more players, more suitable for this for what we're aiming for. So the idea is to reach a playoffs top 8. But we have a lot of players that come in from the under 21 side and are now in the first team, and they have the opportunity to play, and they can play because there's a level below. But also they're very enthusiastic, and they know how to play. So there are a few guys I think are doing well for this level and could grow into the Eredivisie level. But right now I'm really excited about Wassim Essanusi. He plays in the midfield. He can play like an 8, but also as a 10. Has a really good pass, good vision. He sees things just slightly quicker than other players from his age and level. He's 17, and he plays for Morocco under 20, and he has been followed by Ajax and Feyenoord for the last 2 or 3 years. And for him, it's good to have a full season. And a lot of players are. I think a total of 7 players under the age of 20 have already played this season, which is insane. But it also means that this season is not a season that we can get promoted, in my opinion. It's a project. So I believe that in 3 seasons' time, we are fully a candidate to go up, but not yet. And we are a relatively small club, a club that's sometimes too big for the Eerste Divisie and too small for the First Division, for Eredivisie. I'm not sure. Maybe you can relate to Norwich in a way. You know that they are in and around the Premier League, but when they go down, it doesn't take a long time to get back. Well, at least the last few seasons. And I think with us, the potential is there. to be a contender every year in the Eerste Divisie, but because of finances and the COVID pandemic and players not sold, I think this season is going to be a very difficult season where we will not be a title contender, and we could be very happy and lucky to reach the playoffs for promotion in the end.
Yeah, I can't believe that. I completely forgot to mention Giacomakis, who is, of course, the striker that you mentioned there. I mean, that is probably the one other thing that I do know about VVV. That it's something like, was it 26 and 30 last season or something that he got in
Yeah.
the league? I mean, absolutely ridiculous numbers. And there's been interest from Werder Bremen and from Celtic as well. So yeah, that's a transfer that will happen, for the reasons that you outlined just there. But Vasim Esanusi is a name that I hadn't come across before, so I'll definitely note that one down somewhere, and maybe keep an eye on him. But we were discussing just before how the PSV, Ajax, AZ, Utrecht have sort of their B teams in the Eerste Divisie. Obviously, they're not eligible for promotion because of, Ajax can't play against young Ajax in a competitive game, that sort of thing. I mean, you look at the young Ajax team. It's essentially it's an under 21 team. You rarely get players in that side who are older than that. And that's the same for the other young teams. Do you think what's the stance in the Netherlands? Do B teams work? Because I know that in the UK there's there's quite a bit of bite back against the prospect of having under 23 teams playing senior teams in league competition, which has been suggested, but I don't think it's a realistic proposition. What's the stance from the Netherlands? I think I presume that it's probably a different, the stance is a little bit different considering the finances and the fact that it effectively does guarantee a few clubs in the Eredivisie that their players who are going to come in and make debuts in the senior squad already have a repertoire of skills that they've gained from playing senior football in the Eerste Divisie with the young teams.
I think it's a debate of the heart against the head. What does the heart say about the B teams, and what does the head say as a fan? As a fan, you want to be opposed, but you want to play against unique clubs. You don't want to play against teams that are development squads. So they are about developing, and they are different, and that's the fan mentality. So don't ruin that league with a copy of another club. And also sometimes when you come back from an international tournament and some players have to recover and play minutes, they come into the young Ajax team or whatever. So for example, VV played after the World Cup of 2014. We played against young Ajax, and there were 3 or 4 players who were in the Dutch squad. So that's something that stings for people. But in the sense of raising the level of the league and giving those players a chance to play. When we were champions, became champions in 16, 17, we played away at Ajax. And then that squad was Van der Beek, De Jong, Masraoui. Those players were in that squad already. We battled them 04, but those players got minutes, got experience that they won't have at Ajax. Because Ajax, the first team, wouldn't lose 04 against VVV in normal, if you take a normal season. But that's an experience for those players that they can have, and that's really good, I think. But the case is, you can compare to Germany, where Germany said, okay, in the Bundesliga and the second Bundesliga, you can't have those teams. But in the Dritte Liga, so the third tier, you can have those teams. So you have Borussia Dortmund, for example. You have Bayern Munich playing there. So they are developing as well. But I think in the sense of developing players, it's very good, especially if you take a set group playing in and out every week. They are developing, and Ajax and PSV and Utrecht and AZ can keep monitoring that player. So I think that's very good, and you can see that AZ is, at the moment is on top, young AZ. But for the players and for the club, it's a good strategy. But the thing is, the emotion of the fans, for the supporters, and the emotion of that's the thing that's against it. So I'm a little bit 50-50 on it. I can see it on the development side, but yeah, on a fan side, I would rather have a nice away day to another unique stadium I haven't seen before than to go to a youth academy situation.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think that's kind of one of there are merits to it, but there are also drawbacks in that it does feel a bit sanitized and sterilized if you're playing the youth team of a big club who effectively, can, pump more resources into their youth team than if you're a fan of a second division club. They've got more resources than you have for your entire first team, and it doesn't feel like a fair fight. And I mean, yeah, from a fan's perspective, of course, yeah, you want to go to a unique stadium rather than, obviously the two comst is a it's a great, great facilities, but it doesn't quite feel as though it's, a proper football club in and of itself. That it's a
Yeah,
training ground essentially. Whereas, if you were going to somewhere like VVV or, to Cambuur or somewhere like that, it would be, a bit different. Or even clubs like, I mean, especially Sparta Rotterdam, where they have the one of the most unique stadiums that I've come across with the I don't know what you'd call it. Is it sort of like a bell tower in the middle of one of the stands? I think it's brilliant. But
yeah, it's called a castle. So yeah,
yes, yeah. That's one of the things that I'd prefer to do rather than go into a youth academy facility. But yeah, I can see that there are merits and there are drawbacks. Now, I don't have a great grasp on teams and individual players in the Eerste Divisie, but I do know from speaking to Lou Scouted that he's a distant follower of FC Volendam, because they've got players such as Mickey van der Ven. Obviously, last year they had Robert Muren in scoring 50 goals or being involved in 50 goals. They had Samuele Mullatieri, who was on loan from Inter Milan's Primavera team, their under-19 team. And this year, I can't remember the player's name, but they also do have another one from Inter or from one of the Primavera teams in Italy on loan again.
yeah.
Um,
Mm.
Volendam, I think if I was going to pick a team in the Eerste Divisie to loosely support, I think it would be them on the basis that they're pretty much the team that I know most about, and they are, of course, a team in their own right.
Yeah, yeah. I believe that every team has an exciting squad. Every team has, that standout player, that seasoned player, and that one two talents breaking through. Um, the thing is that a lot of the talents are getting transferred to bigger academies when they're 15, 16. So what is left are not exactly the top of the bunch, but still there are some gems in the Eerste Divisie, and they're making minutes. And that's the thing. What I said earlier, if they're making minutes, they're more. That's kind of a thing for bigger clubs because they have the minutes on professional level. They know what it is to get results instead of only developing. And I think that's why this league is so suitable for young talent coming in, and also talents coming in for this semi professional leagues by playing the minutes and then go into the Eredivisie or the Jupiler Pro League in Belgium. Um, that's a whole other thing, but that's a really good feeder ground for talents and for talents to develop. And I think that there are a lot of talents, a few more obvious than others. But if you play in that division, you come back stronger. For example, Luis Fiorini played at NAC Breda last season for Manchester City, and I think he seasoned really well. He matured really well on the pitch. He know how to score. He does know not only to make action, but make decisive action. What leads to an assist? What leads to a goal scoring opportunity? What leads to a goal? When do you shoot? When do you not shoot? Do you listen to more uh, uh, seasoned players, or do you take your own chance? That kind of thing that happens in those leagues, and that's why a loan can be very good for those players.
Yeah, and the more that you mention about the Eerste Divisie, the more I realise I actually do know about it because I do know about Luis Fiorini as well, who's obviously a Scottish youth international who was at NAC Breda last season, as you said. But yeah, Mullatieri was one who I think he scored 18 last season for Volendam. Mickey van der
Mm.
Ven, he is. I did read somewhere that there was some interest from Marseille of all clubs
Yeah,
earlier on in the window, which is really curious because you wouldn't think that I mean, ordinarily you wouldn't think that clubs would be scouting the Eerste Divisie like that, but because typically you'd get players which would, if they weren't immediately fast tracked to the top academies at 15 and 16, as you say, then they would then be the ones from the Eerste Divisie would then be signed in the Eredivisie by clubs in the Eredivisie, and then clubs in Liga, Bundesliga, that sort of thing would go for them. But it seemed as though Marseille were sort of looking to cut out the middleman there. I don't know what happened with that. I don't know if you have any idea whether that was genuine or was just talk.
Yeah, the thing is that when these clubs come in, and it's very difficult to assess how serious they are, what is the plan. So, for example, Paris Saint-Germain also comes a lot with players. So, but they are fillers for the second team, and they don't have a possibility to make it in the first team. So, in what way are you trying to build your under 23 squad, and what way are they serious about the chance to the first team? And that's the thing, which should be assessed in that way. So I'm not sure what happened, but I think that the idea of where he will go, his career path at Olympique Marseille, would be not as attractive as they sold out to be.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. The fact that you don't want to be coming in to then essentially play in a B team essentially when you could be playing senior football for a senior club, and also I suppose if Marseille are interested in you and you're only playing in the Eerste Divisie, then clearly you've made a good enough impression on somebody somewhere that means by proxy other teams will be looking at you. Maybe not at the same prestige as Marseille, but to other teams who can offer you top flight football elsewhere. But Mark, I don't know if you've got any individual player picks just to finish us off from the Eerste Divisie, perhaps to look out for this season. None as on the same level as the ones that we discussed in the Eredivisie, but do you have any for us?
Yeah, I have two. I have Duivenstein from Almere City. He played for Helmond Sport last season, played now for Almere. They are a very ambitious team, and I just love his dynamic play. He's everywhere. He put so much energy in the box, and he scored against us against VVV last Saturday. But he's just so energetic, and he wants to be in the attack and helps in the counter pressing and in the pressing. That was what I was really impressed with Duivenstein from Almere City. And someone with a funny name, Jis Hoornkamp. He plays for FC Den Bosch. And he's really, really good. He has a really good strike ability, but also can play as a right back or a left back. So I'm really excited to see him develop. I think he will have a breakout season, just Hoornkamp at FC Den Bosch. Den Bosch is a team to look out for. They are just they have been taken over by a group of football clubs, and they're going to be very interesting to follow this season.
Yeah, Jis Hoornkamp, possibly one of the best names in football the world over, I think it's fair to say. If he ends up having a breakout season, then I think there'll be quite a few people cottoning on to the fact that is, in fact, his name. Thank you very much, Mark, for joining me on this week's pod. It's been a pleasure to talk about Dutch football, the trends in sort of with B teams and whatnot, and individual players, and as well your own experience. As I said, if you'd like to follow Mark, and I do thoroughly recommend it for some really insightful and fascinating, data visualizations and tactical concepts and just general scouting chit chat, then do follow Mark on Twitter at @LambertsMark. But that is all from us on the Scouted Football Podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll be back next week. Stay safe. Take care. Bye for now.